wealth and money and getting as much money as possible is seen as the ultimate goal and the ultimate reward for us. And it is also counted as the best means of success and how we can classify ourselves as successful people. And it doesn't help when you have social media which glorifies extreme luxury, which has advertisements which push for commercialism and pushing people to spend as much money as possible on things which will make their life easier or supposedly more beneficial. And as a result of this, the vast majority of Muslims, especially young Muslims when they're growing up, get taken in by this world of money and wealth, and they make it their focal point of their life to get as much money as possible to benefit them and get rich. However, Islam has a different outlook on this, and Islam sets a framework for how people should conduct their actions and how they should use their money to truly be successful individuals. And so we need to ask ourselves, is getting rich a priority for us as Muslims? Is it something which Islam recommends or tells us not to do? And inshallah, we need to look at 4 different aspects of this today, which I will go through very shortly, using verses of the Quran and a hadith to try and figure out the answer to this question. The first thing to point out is that in Islam, being wealthy and acquiring money can be seen as a blessing in some regards. And this is a blessing when it is used correctly for purposes where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has asked us to gain money. For example, in the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, and spend from that which He has made you trustees. Now there are 3 things to point out when Allah says this verse in the Quran. The first thing is that wealth and money ultimately belongs to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. What He tells us in the verse is that it is from Him and He has made you a trustee on it. Meaning that when we use phrases like my money or the money which I have, it's an incorrect statement, because this is something which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala owns, and He has just given you the power to use it, and He has delegated you the authority to use it. Secondly, we are only temporary trustees or custodians of this money. We all know that this life ends, and when we go into our next life, we don't carry this money with us. So it's not something which should be taken as the center point of our life. And thirdly, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us that He has made us trustees of wealth, trustees of money. Meaning that if we use money for an incorrect purpose or for haram purposes, then we have violated the trust and the contract which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has bestowed on us. Meaning that we have violated one of the laws and commandments and trusts of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So it's a very important thing, money. And it's also important as to how we use it and how we treat it. Allah also says in the Quran, but seek through what Allah has given you, the home of the hereafter, and yet do not forget your share of the world. What does this mean? It shows that wealth and money is not haram. Getting money and getting wealth and having money in your bank account is not something which Islam forbids you from doing, not at all. But what it tells us in this verse is that money is just a means to an end. Meaning it isn't something which should encompass your entire being. It shouldn't be something which your sole sight should be focused on in your life. And it tells us that if used correctly, the purpose of money should be to provide for your family. Meaning to spend what you have to make sure that they are living good, comfortable lives and that you are providing for them because you have a right over them, and that is the right to provide for them. Money also should be used in helping poor and needy people, something which not just our religion as a whole, but specifically the Quran itself expresses the importance of giving the money which we have as a surplus to poor people who are in need of it. And we should also be using it to support the causes of Islam as a whole as well. One example of this is a doctor. Now, when someone is young and they are going through their studies, they may come and they say, I want to become a doctor or an engineer. Mainly they say a doctor and study medicine, so that I can get a good career and earn a lot of money from it. Now, some people think they understand Islam and they will come and say to that person, no, you shouldn't go into this field just for gaining money. Money shouldn't be a factor in it. But I would stop that person and I would say that this is also incorrect. It all depends on the intention and the purpose of how you are going to use this money. If you are going to use it just to fulfill your own needs and build a lavish life, then no, it is not permissible for you to go and seek the money in this regard. However, if your intention is to go and build mosques as a result of it, or give as much money as you can to poor people, and this is why you want to seek high wages, then this is something commendable and actually not just recommended, but wajib on you if you are able to do so. Likewise, although money and wealth can be a blessing for us, Allah also tells us that it can be used as a trial, as a tribulation, and as a test against us as well when we misuse it. Allah warns us in the Quran that your wealth and your children are only a trial, and Allah has with him a great reward. So, wealth can either make you or it can break you. It can make you in the sense that it can elevate you up if you use this money for good and noble purposes, meaning that in the hereafter Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala promises you a good reward. But it can also destroy you, in the sense that if you're using this money in a way whereby you're only seeking to bring benefit to yourself and not to those around you and not to poor people who are in need of it, then it can destroy you. It can turn you into a greedy person, an arrogant person, where everything in your life is focused on getting as much money as possible for yourself. Some of the examples which you see of this today are businessmen, Muslim businessmen, who set out in the path of gaining a good income for themselves and their family. But when they start getting richer, and when the money starts accumulating in their bank account, all they can think about is getting more. All they can think about is acquiring as much wealth as possible, and therefore it leads them astray. They start forgetting to pray their prayers because the pursuit of money is more important. They don't give zakat in the way in which they should because they're trying to hold on to as much wealth as possible for themselves. The person who ends up doing this is failing that test, that criteria which Allah sets out in the Quran, whereby if you use it for good, then it will elevate you and He will reward you. And if you use it for bad purposes and not in the way which He has commanded you to, then it will eventually destroy you and destroy your chances of gaining salvation in the Akhirah. So the Quran gives two perspectives: the positive aspect of gaining money and gaining wealth, and the negative aspect. In the positive aspect, Allah says that wealth and children are the adornment, are the beauties of this worldly life. But likewise, He also says in the negative warning aspect that your wealth and your children are a trial and a test upon you to see how you will act. And Imam Sadiq goes on to explain this a little bit further. He says, الدنيا سجن المؤمن وجنة الكافر. The world is a prison for the believer and it is a paradise for the disbeliever. So if you are someone who is living comfortably in your life and you're not experiencing any difficulties, you're not having problems managing your finance, you're living a very lavish lifestyle with no issues, then perhaps you might be doing something wrong. If you feel that everything is going your way, there's no problems harming you, there's no problems harming your family, you're living lavishly, then there may be an issue. There may be something which you need to fix. Because a true believer will be facing a lot of difficulties within his life. And it isn't me who says this, again it's Imam Sadiq. He says, indeed the mu'min undergoes trials in proportion to his good deeds. Someone whose faith and whose iman is sound and his deeds are good, his trials and his tests are more severe and more difficult. And that is because Allah did not make this world a place for rewarding the mu'min and punishing the disbeliever. This is meant for the Akhirah. He says that the one whose faith is very weak and he doesn't do many good deeds, then he will face fewer difficulties in this life. And he goes on to explain why this is the case. And some people may know the answer already, but he says that difficulties will hasten a believer and will make a believer go quicker towards his faith, rather than if he is living a comfortable life where he will forget Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Why does Allah do this? The Imam tells us He does it so that with these tests and with these difficulties, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is trying to bring us closer to Him. When we go through these tests and difficulties, He's given us the chance, He's given us the opportunity to decide whether we go closer to Him and place our trust in Him, which He commands, or whether we go astray and we try using haram means to survive and to gain better places in this world. And you can see the evidence of this in reality. You see that sometimes the best, purest people you know have the most difficult circumstances. And some of the most evil, horrible people which you encounter live lives with no problems within them whatsoever. Now there are practical examples of the spiritual outcomes which a person can have in the way in which they use money. Say we have two people, one is called Ahmed and one is called Ali. Ahmed uses his salary to build mosques. Whatever money he gets as a surplus, he goes and he spends it in the way of trying to build mosques in communities which need it. Then you have someone like Ali, for example, who has the exact same salary, he has the exact same financial status, yet he uses this money to buy himself nice cars, where he doesn't need to upgrade, he doesn't need to buy a new Mercedes, the one he had is fine, but he uses that money for himself. People aren't gaining any benefit. So there are two people with the same salary, with the same financial status, yet in the Akhirah they will have very different stations, because one person is using this to further the needs of his community, and one person is using it to further his own needs. One of the dangerous things about wealth is that loving it too much can bring about a lot of spiritual diseases. Our Imams have told us that the love of this world and the love of the dunya is one of the roots of sin. It is something which, when you trace back sins, you will find that love of the world is at the heart of it. And an example of this which you'll see is celebrities, for example. Nowadays you have millionaires, sometimes even billionaires. They have so much money that they will never be in any distress financially ever in their lives. They could afford to sponsor the lives of thousands of people with the amount of money which they have. Yet what you'll see from them is that they don't settle with this amount. They constantly keep chasing more and more and more. The greed gets to them, to the effect that it becomes their life mission to have as much money as possible, even though in reality they will never spend all of this money. And what you'll examine, especially from celebrities and these rich people, is that their family ties get severed because they're putting their wealth ahead of their family. Their mental health deteriorates to the extent that there are such high suicide rates amongst these people that what is the point of gaining all this money if it leads you to killing yourself and not having any use for it? One of the dangers of it, and one of the reasons why this is the case, is because it leads the heart away from the remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah tells us about this when He says, indeed man transgresses when he considers himself to be self-sufficient. When a man thinks that him having a lot of money means that he will get through this life in a breeze and that everything will be okay for him, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala warns that this is a transgressing person who is deviating away from what Allah has commanded. One of the examples, unfortunately in this community, or in most communities which we have, is for young people, when they finish their studies and when they go into getting high paid jobs, or God forbid they go into haram income, they spend less time coming to the masjid. They spend less time coming to the Husayniyah. Why? Because they're too busy. The corporate life takes over and everything becomes about chasing as much money as possible and getting rich. And whoever examines the verses of the Quran and whoever tries to find out the Islamic perspective on the use of money, goods, services, or anything which a man can use in his life, they will find something. And that they will find that the Quran regards all of these things which we can use, such as money, such as goods. The only reason Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has put them on this earth, and the real purpose of having money, is to satisfy your needs, not anything more than that. Meaning that, something I'll go on to explain a little bit more, anything which goes beyond what you need and the essentials are things in which you should not keep, you should distance yourself from. There are a lot of responsibilities that come with this money. The responsibilities of paying zakat and paying khums, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us, take from their wealth a charity to purify them and sanctify them with it. We've been told that no wealth or no money is purified unless your zakat is paid from this amount. So if you have an individual who has a lot of money, and instead of paying the zakat to the people who need it, he keeps it for himself so that he may benefit his family when he dies in the future, or so that he can spend it on lavish needs that he doesn't have any need for, then he is someone who his wealth is not purified. His wealth ultimately is not halal. The best practical example you have of this, if you want to compare it, it's like a farmer who has all his crops and he's grown crops. If he doesn't tend to these and give it what it needs, then the crops will fail. Likewise, a person who has a lot of money yet avoids paying the charity which is necessary for a rich person won't reap any of the benefits in the afterlife. It will only benefit him in this world, which is very temporary and very short. It will bring no barakah to him. Again, Amir al-Mu'mineen tells us in Nahj al-Balagha that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made it obligatory on the wealthy to provide for the poor people. And therefore, a person who spends his money on building free schools for orphans or building mosques for communities in need is better than the one who spends his money buying luxury cars or luxury clothes. Because Islam strictly forbids amassing large amounts of wealth without investing it in profitable or honourable projects. The Quran heavily rejects the misappropriation and the misuse of the wealth of the Ummah and the treasury of the Ummah. And it states that this money should be reaching every Muslim individual. It should be spread equally amongst these people. Not a case where some people have lots of money and lots of people have no money. This is a big thing which I want to point out, and it's very important because a lot of people are not aware of it. And the best person who has explained this in his lectures in the English language is Sheikh Ja'far Nadak. And what he says, and what he bases his Islamic economical lectures on, is all derived from the Holy Quran. And it is that, meaning, after you have paid all of your expenses, after you have finished paying off all of your bills, all of your food costs, all of the needs to provide for your family, any of the money which is left over in your account, any money which you have left sitting in your pocket, that money is called a surplus and it does not belong to you. That money which you have left over after you have spent all on your needs should be given away to the poor people. How many of us actually do this? How many of us spend the remaining amounts of money in our bank account which we don't need to give it to poor people? The vast majority of Muslims don't do this. They keep it locked away. They keep it as an investment for themselves. Not because they need it, but because they want to have it for security. But our Maraja have expanded on the dangers of doing this. Ayatollah Misbah Yazdi, may Allah have mercy on his soul, confirmed this. He says, if you acquire wealth, then you ought to make use of only what you need for your basic needs, and you should be putting the rest at the disposal of the poor, of your relatives, and of your friends who need this money. The examples we have of this are from Amir al-Mu'mineen. Amir al-Mu'mineen worked very hard as a labourer to earn money, yet all of that money was given as charity from what he didn't need. He would sleep on the floor despite being a ruler and despite being the commander of the faithful and of the Muslims. So the lesson to take from Amir al-Mu'mineen is that wealth is for serving other people, not for the luxury of yourself. Likewise, we have a woman like Lady Khadija, who was wealthy but was devoted to the cause of Islam. Although she was among the richest women in the city of Mecca and in the land of Mecca, she used her money and her business to support the needs of the Muslims and for the cause of Islam. And the Prophet himself said that her means and her wealth was a tool of divine help. Meaning, and the lesson to take away from Lady Khadija is that money and wealth is a tool for us, not a goal. We shouldn't aspire to be rich. We should aspire to gain money for the sake of helping others. And so we should balance our dunya and akhirah. We should split our income into our needs, our bills, providing for our family in the first instance. Then we should take some for our savings and investments, so that if God forbid anything happens to us, our family will be secure. Anything else after that we should have in your possession should be given away as zakat. So the answer to the question, is getting rich a priority in the religion of Islam? The answer is no. Although our religion doesn't forbid us from getting money and getting wealth, even if it be in a large amount or quantity, it warns us against making this money the main goal of our life. Islam wants wealth and money to play their natural role in our lives. It wants us to gratify all of the natural needs which we have to survive. But it also emphasizes that individuals and groups should not monopolize all of this money, or this wealth, or these profits at the expense of people living in poor situations at the same time. Therefore, true success is defined in three ways. First, having a halal income. Secondly, living a moderate lifestyle, which is not extravagant but also not too simple. Islam doesn't ask us to go and sleep on the floor in a mud hut and live in absolute despair and poverty. No, it says live within your means. Live comfortably, but not too much. And lastly, we need to be generous. Help others with the wealth that we have. We need to take away 3 points and 3 questions to ask ourselves. First, are we working hard in our jobs to help benefit other people and pay zakat? Or are we just doing it to buy luxuries for ourselves? Secondly, are we paying our zakat and funds properly in the way in which Allah has commanded us to do so? And thirdly, are we using this wealth to please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala or to show off and please other people around us? The last thing to point out is that you should not be ashamed if you are poor or if you are in a lower financial status, because there is a hadith from the Prophet, peace be upon him, where he addresses the loyal companion Abu Dharr al-Ghifari. And he says that the poor Muslims will be led to paradise with their feet placed on the shoulders of other people. Then the treasurers of Jannah will ask them, stay in your place. These people will reply back, why have we to stay in this place? They will say, we swear by Allah that we did not have the power to spend our money in Allah's way. Wealth which was granted to us was just enough to secure our needs, so we could neither spend it to help other people, but we also didn't have enough money to be greedy with it as well. But we worshipped Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and in the end we accepted His divine call. These people are the ones who have the high-ranking statuses in heaven and in Jannah. We should prioritize chasing things which will protect us for our akhirah, rather than providing us with temporary pleasure in this dunya. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to grant victory to the mu'mineen and the mazlumeen, and for all the shuhada, please recite Surah Al-Fatiha after Salat ala Muhammad wa Ali Muhammad.